Today we are looking at dividing polynomials, and to do that we're actually just going to take a quick look at the warm-up. To divide fractions, and this is something that we've been introduced to as we've been learning skills throughout our math careers. To divide fractions, you actually multiply, and you multiply by the reciprocal. So our 2/5 is going to stay the same, and then we are going to multiply by 20 over 1. So when I do 2/5 divided by 1/20, I'm actually going to keep the 2/5 the same. Then I'm going to change the division to multiplication, and then I'm going to flip my fraction to its reciprocal, 20 over 1. Then the same rules apply that we had yesterday. Anytime we have common factors, we can divide those out. So our 20 and 5 are both divisible by 5, so we'll reduce 5 down to 1, reduce 20 down to 4, and get our answer then. Our 2 times 4 in our numerator is 8. 1 times 1 in our denominator is 1, which gives us 8. So to divide fractions, we are simply going to multiply by their reciprocal. So we are going to do problems with rational expressions, and then to divide rational expressions, we are still going to follow that same idea, same process as we did when we're dividing fractions. So heading to our first problem here, our x plus 2 over x minus 5 divided by x squared minus 7x over x squared minus 5x. So I am going to keep that first fraction the same, so x plus 2 divided by x minus 5, that's going to stay the same. I'm going to change to multiplication, and then I'm going to use the reciprocal. Now I'm also going to simplify, so I'm going to take this x squared minus 5x. Since there's an x that's in common in both of those, I'm going to divide that x out, put it out in front of the parentheses, and then still put what's remaining in parentheses. So I've got x times x minus 5. So that polynomial I'm looking at, it's got 2 terms, and then both terms have an x in it. So that's that common factor that they have. So I'm going to divide that out. Now it's factored. It's into x times x minus 5. Now while I'm doing this factoring, I'm also doing the reciprocal. So now in my denominator, I'm going to take and put this polynomial. So that polynomial has a common x as well. So the x comes out. And then I'm going to have an x minus 7. So there would be my factored version of that second polynomial. Now I'm ready to start my multiplication, but before we multiply, we want to look, is there anything that we can simplify out? So I look at my numerator, I have an x plus 2. I check my denominator, do I have any other x plus 2's in my denominator? I do not. So, whoops, I did not mean to do that. Don't know what I was thinking there. So I do not cancel that out, so that's going to still be x plus 2 up in the numerator. I look at my next factor in my numerator, I have an x. Well, if I have an x in the numerator and I have an x in the denominator, those can cancel out. So they're going to be the exact same number. Whenever you divide 2 numbers the same, they become 1, so those are gone. And lastly, I have an x minus 5, and I have another x minus 5, so I'll cancel those out as well. All in all, now we're ready to multiply. In my numerator, I just have an x plus 2, that's it. And in my denominator, I just have an x minus 7. So once we get the polynomials factored, which is going to be the biggest skill that we'll need is that factoring skill, then it's just starting to look at the numerator denominator, and they're going to be set up to where we can start finding some common factors. All right. Now looking down at example 3, we have got a fraction that's being multiplied by another fraction, and then we have this last fraction that's dividing. So we're going to first rewrite so that everything is multiplying, because we don't actually divide fractions, we multiply by their reciprocals. So this last fraction is going to end up changing to times x minus 2 over 1. So this one is the one I'm going to change to its reciprocal because that's the only fraction that's being divided. Now we're ready to start factoring everything else. So 21, I cannot factor that down any further. X squared plus x minus 6. So that's going to factor into 2 binomials, where our x is our first terms. And then we got to find 2 numbers that multiply to -6, and then the same 2 numbers would add to 1. So a little hint, when you see that it multiplies to -6, one of the numbers is positive, one of the numbers is negative, and then we need the two numbers to add to 1. So they have to have a difference of 1. They're 1 apart. So those two numbers would be x plus 3 and x minus 2. Got a little sloppy. That's a plus sign there. So x plus 3, x minus 2, that's going to be the factored version of that trinomial. Next, I've got a 2x squared plus 6x. So here I have two terms. So I cannot divide it there, cannot factor this into two binomials like I did the last one. So only two terms. I'm going to look for a GCF. 2 and 6, what are they both divisible by? 2. X squared and x, that at least has an x in common. So 2x is going to come out. Divide 2x squared by 2x, it becomes x. 6x divided by 2x, well, 6 divided by 2 is 3, and then the x's will cancel. So that factors into 2x times x plus 3. Lastly, I have my denominator, which I have nothing else to factor there. I've got a 3x to the third, and then a y. Now is where I start looking, where are those common factors? So 21, I look in my denominator. There are no 21s, but is there a number that 21 is a factor with? And that is 3. So that would become a 1. 21 would become a 7 because 21 is divisible by 3. We get 7. Next, I would look at 2. I don't have any other numbers that are common factors with 2 in the denominator, so that stays in my problem. Next, I have an x. This x is going to cancel out one of these down here. So now I have an x squared down there. X plus 3. I do have an x plus 3 in my denominator. There it is. X minus 2. I do have an x minus 2 in my denominator. There it is. Now, it is getting a little bit busy as we look at this, but now I'm looking at the blue. I've got a 7 times 2, which is 14, and everything else in the numerator canceled out. So I got a 14 in my numerator. This is all gone right here. 1 times x squared times y times 1 is just going to be x squared y. So there's going to be my final result, 14 over x squared y. So once we get things factored, we start looking at finding where in my numerator denominator have the exact same thing. Once we get that, we can start to cancel out those. And we get a much simpler, you can see, you get a much simpler fraction at the end. So we're practicing with dividing fractions today. One little note where it says in example B there, find all the values that make the expression undefined. We'll continue to bring that in later on. In Delta Math, we are not practicing that yet. We're just working on the skills of factoring and then also looking at working on just the skills of multiplying and dividing right now. So I know in our notes it does say the expression is undefined, and if we were in class, we would be working a little bit more with that. But as far as with the distant learning right now, we're just going to be working on the skill of multiplying and dividing. So heading to Delta Math, you are now ready to go practice. There are 4 problems to practice. I will stick around if you want to stick around to help, but if you're ready to break off on your own for practicing Delta Math, good to see you all. Thanks for coming. And if you want to stick around to work, you can go ahead and do that, and I will help out with any problems that you need.